The winter night pressed down on the city like a heavy, freezing blanket. Wind clawed its way through the narrow streets, rattling old signboards and pushing bits of trash across the pavement. Streetlights flickered in patches, casting weak yellow circles that barely kept the darkness away. In one of those dimly lit circles sat a man whose presence most people ignored, even though he had once been someone the world depended on. Ethan Gray sat hunched on a cold metal bench at a bus shelter, his thin jacket barely protecting him from the sharp wind. His beard had grown unevenly, his hair unkempt, and his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights and memories he had no one to share with.
Out there.
His hands trembled slightly as he held a paper cup of lukewarm soup that a kind volunteer had given him earlier. He wasn't drunk, nor lost, nor broken beyond repair. He was simply forgotten, an invisible piece of the city who once gave everything he had. Cars passed by without slowing. People walked past without looking. The world had moved on, but Ethan hadn't. As he sat there quietly, a group of young special operations trainees stood across the road near a military van. 3 men and 1 woman, all wearing crisp uniforms, all chatting loudly, full of confidence and pride. They were part of a Delta Force preparation group, and you could see from their expressions that they believed they were destined for greatness. One of the male trainees stretched and glanced toward Ethan. His eyes landed on the edge of a faded tattoo peeking from under Ethan's sleeve. A mocking smile spread across his face. "Hey," he called to the others, pointing. "Look at that. A homeless guy trying to look like a soldier. That tattoo looks like something from a comic book." The others laughed immediately. Their voices cut through the cold air, sharp and careless. Another trainee snorted loudly. "Probably watched too many war movies," he said. "People like him always try to pretend they've served." Ethan didn't react. He simply pulled his sleeve lower, as if trying to hide not just the tattoo, but the years of pain that came with it. His shoulders tightened. His eyes looked down at the ground. He knew the drill. People judged what they didn't understand. But one person didn't laugh. Captain Maya Holt, the only woman in the group, stood slightly behind the others. She didn't join in their jokes, nor did she smile. Her eyes had narrowed, not with amusement, but with curiosity. Something about that tattoo didn't feel fake. It wasn't the style of someone seeking attention. It was detailed, burnt in with meaning, symbols, and a pattern she recognized from somewhere she couldn't immediately place. She took a small step forward, trying to see it better, the shapes, the way the lines connected. It triggered something in her memory. She had seen it before, buried somewhere in old classified archives she studied during her intelligence training. Files she wasn't even supposed to spend much time on, files marked with red tags, files about missions that weren't meant to exist. Her pulse quickened. The others were still laughing, tossing jokes back and forth, their voices bouncing off the empty street. But Maya didn't hear them anymore. She was staring at Ethan, trying to quiet the sudden rush of thoughts in her mind. Could it be real? It shouldn't be. The unit connected to that tattoo had been wiped from existence decades ago. Everyone in it was listed as missing or dead, and no one, not a single survivor, had surfaced since. Still, something inside her whispered that she wasn't mistaken. Ethan sensed her staring and finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was something else in them. A depth, a calmness, a kind of silent endurance that didn't match the image of a defeated homeless man. For a moment, Maya felt as though she was looking at someone who had walked through storms she could barely imagine. She took a breath and stepped away from her team. "Hey, Maya, where are you going?" One of the trainees called. "Let it go, he's just some old guy." But Maya ignored them. As she approached Ethan, the wind grew harsher, pressing her coat against her body. She stopped a few feet from him, not wanting to startle him. He looked up again, cautious yet composed. "Sir," she began softly, "may I see the tattoo on your arm?" Ethan's eyes widened slightly. That wasn't the question he expected. He hesitated, then shook his head. "It's nothing," he murmured, "just an old mark." Behind her, the trainees chuckled again. "Come on, Maya," one shouted. "Stop wasting time. He's nobody." But Maya's instincts screamed otherwise. She had trained for years, studied countless battle histories, memorized unit insignias, operations, and codes. She knew what she had seen, even in that brief glimpse. She took another step and lowered her voice. "I'm not here to judge you," she said gently. I think I've seen that symbol before." Ethan's breath hitched. He gripped his cup tighter. The woman trainee crouched slightly to level her gaze with his. "Sir," she said again, "please, just a look." For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. The wind blew his hair, the street lamp flickered, and the sound of a distant siren filled the air. Finally, he slowly pushed his sleeve up. Just an inch, enough for Maya to see the lines clearly. Her heart thudded against her ribs. It wasn't a fake. It wasn't something from a movie. It belonged to ***, Unit 17 Ghost Division ***, one of the most secretive squads ever created. A unit believed to have perished entirely during Operation Black Ridge. A unit whose surviving members, if any existed, would never have been allowed to walk openly in the world. And here one was, freezing in a bus shelter, mocked by trainees who didn't know who stood before them. Maya's breath caught. Everything she had learned told her this moment shouldn't be possible. Which meant only one thing: the man in front of her wasn't just a homeless stranger. He was someone the world wasn't supposed to know had survived. Someone carrying stories erased from history. Someone who had lived through missions people would never believe. Someone her team had just mocked without understanding the weight of his past. And the night was only beginning to reveal its truth. Maya's mind spun as she stared at the faint tattoo on Ethan's arm. It wasn't simply ink on skin. It was a code, one used only by a unit that officially didn't exist. Her teammates still stood behind her, talking among themselves, laughing occasionally as if nothing in the world mattered. But Maya no longer heard their voices. Her attention was fixed entirely on the man quietly sitting in front of her, whose past was beginning to unfold in front of her eyes like a hidden map. Ethan gently rolled his sleeve back down, as if afraid that exposing any more might pull painful memories back to the surface. Maya watched him carefully. He wasn't proud, nor did he try to impress anyone. He was simply tired. That kind of exhaustion didn't come from a day on the street. It came from years of carrying things people couldn't imagine. She spoke again, her voice lower this time. "Sir, I need to ask you something important. That tattoo, it belongs to a unit I've only seen in restricted files." She paused. "Are you connected to the Ghost Division?" Ethan flinched almost imperceptibly at the name. His fingers tightened around the crumpled soup cup. For the first time, he looked away, not to hide something, but because the name itself carried a weight he hadn't spoken aloud in decades. Behind her, one trainee groaned. "Ghost Division again. Seriously, Maya, that's just an old military myth. It's not real." Another added, "Yeah, if that tattoo was real, he'd be in a military hospital or a war museum, not sitting on a bench waiting for soup." They laughed again, but their voices seemed distant now. Even the wind grew quieter, as if waiting for Ethan to speak. He took a slow breath, his shoulders trembling slightly. Then he looked Maya straight in the eyes. It was only for a second, but that second carried more truth than anything she'd seen from him before. "Holt," he murmured softly, "some things were never meant to be talked about." Maya felt goosebumps rise along her skin. Her training had taught her how to read people. Their lies, their defenses, their stories hidden behind silence. Ethan wasn't lying. He was protecting something. She crouched down beside him, keeping her tone respectful but firm. "I'm not here to expose you or force you," she said. "But I recognize that design, that symbol, the broken falcon and the 17-line arc around it. It was only given to one unit, and that unit was sent on missions where no one was expected to return." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You know too much." "I know too little," she replied. The streetlight above them flickered again, casting shadows across Ethan's worn face. He looked older in that light, older not in age, but in experience, as if he had lived several lives inside one body. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke. "Ghost Division didn't die because of the mission," he said quietly. "We died because it was easier for them to declare us dead. Cleaning up loose ends, that's what they called it." Maya felt her heart drop. "Then I'm one of the loose ends they forgot to find," Ethan finished with a sad, tired smile. Her teammates stared, confused. "What's he saying?" "This is ridiculous, Maya. He's messing with you." but she knew he wasn't. Maya's voice grew softer. The tattoo, it's incomplete. I only saw part of it. If it really is from your unit, it should have additional markers. Mission coordinates, dates, the falcon crest, and Ethan cut her off by slowly pushing up his sleeve again. But this time, he didn't stop at just a few centimeters. He raised it all the way to his shoulder. Maya's breath caught in her throat. What she saw wasn't just a tattoo. It was an entire sleeve of symbols. Encrypted codes, miniature patterns, operational timelines, scars integrated into designs as if they were part of the artwork. Some parts of the tattoo looked burned, melted slightly, as if fire had split through the ink. Others were faded, worn from time and trauma. Her teammates fell silent behind her. The mocking expression on the first trainee's face vanished. The others stopped shifting restlessly. Nobody laughed now. Maya reached out, but she didn't touch. She simply followed the lines with her eyes, recognizing symbols she had once studied in dusty files she thought were fictional. "You weren't supposed to come back," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "We weren't supposed to survive, but you did." His gaze dropped to the cold pavement. Some of us, for a while. The wind carried the unspoken truth. Most of his unit had not made it. And those who did were scattered, erased, forgotten, forced to live in shadows while the world they had protected moved on. Maya felt a heaviness form in her chest. "How long have you been alone like this?" Ethan shrugged faintly. "Since the last of my brothers died after that. There was no point in trying to explain who I was. No one would believe me." The honesty in his voice broke something in her. She remembered training rooms filled with medals, portraits of soldiers hailed as heroes, and ceremonies honoring bravery. But before her sat a soldier whose bravery no one had ever acknowledged, a man the world had thrown away after using him until he had nothing left. One of the trainees finally stepped forward, wiping the disbelief from his face. "Sir, were you really Delta?" Ethan didn't look at him. "I wasn't Delta." He murmured, "I was something created before Delta existed. Something they don't talk about anymore." Maya's eyes widened. That meant he wasn't just a veteran. He was part of the foundation of elite operations. A pioneer, a ghost kept alive by sheer will. "Why come here?" she asked gently. "To this city?" Ethan sighed, his voice barely a whisper. "I was looking for a place where the memories wouldn't follow me. Turns out memories don't care where you run." Maya stood slowly, her entire view of the world shifting. Her teammates looked stunned, guilty, afraid to say anything more. None of them had expected that the man they mocked was a chapter of military history so deeply buried that even officers avoided speaking of it. And none of them knew that this discovery was only the beginning of a truth the world had long forgotten, a truth Ethan had carried alone for more than half his lifetime. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small barracks room, staring at the ceiling long after lights out. Ethan's words replayed in her mind, each one heavier than the last. Ghost Division, Operation Black Ridge, declared dead. Erased. She had read whispers of these things in old files. Files missing pages, blacked out paragraphs, operations marked with dates but not descriptions. They were mysteries even senior officers refused to discuss. But now she had seen living proof, and she couldn't ignore it. By morning, she had made her decision. Before sunrise, she reached the bus shelter again. Ethan was still there, sitting in the same spot, though his posture was more tense, as if he felt the weight of a world he once belonged to but no longer fit into. The night cold had strengthened the lines on his face, and the exhaustion etched deeper. "Good morning, Captain," Ethan said quietly before she even spoke. He had known she would return. "I want to take you somewhere," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "A place where someone will recognize what you're carrying." He shook his head. "You don't know what you're asking for." But she did, and she knew she couldn't walk away now. When the transport van arrived, the other trainees were already inside, strangely silent. No mocking today. No arrogance, just a cloud of uncertainty that hung over them like a storm about to break. Ethan stepped inside slowly, suspicious but compliant. The trainees avoided his eyes. As they drove toward the base, the once confident men and women felt their throats tighten. They had insulted him, belittled a man whose scars spoke of battles they couldn't imagine. Every bump in the road seemed to shake their guilt loose. When the van passed through the main gate, a guard frowned at Ethan. "Who's this?" Meyer answered firmly, "A veteran. I requested a meeting with General Hale." The guard hesitated. No one simply requested a meeting with the commanding general of Delta operations. But Maya's tone held authority, and her posture carried urgency. The gate opened. Maya helped Ethan out of the van. He looked uncomfortable, uneasy about stepping onto military soil after decades of being told to disappear. The base stretched out before him. Buildings he once trained in, fields where he once ran, walls he had guarded, now filled with strangers who would never know his name. Soldiers walked past, glancing briefly at the group. Some ignored them. Others looked at Ethan with curiosity, wondering why a homeless man was being escorted by Delta trainees. Maya walked ahead with purpose. "General Hale is in his office. He'll want to see this." "This," Ethan said quietly, "might ruin everything you know." She stopped and looked him in the eyes, or it might fix everything they broke. They reached the command center. Maya knocked once, sharply. "Enter." A deep voice called. General Marcus Hale sat behind his desk, surrounded by screens and files. He was a man built by discipline, sharp lines, controlled expressions, and eyes that missed nothing. At first he didn't look up. "Captain Holt, this had better be." He lifted his gaze and froze. It wasn't Maya who had caught his attention. It was the man standing behind her. The general's jaw slackened. His fingers loosened around the pen he held. His eyes widened with disbelief, so raw it seemed to shake his entire posture. The room went silent. "Gray," he whispered. Ethan stood still, unsure whether to salute or run. "It's been a long time, Marcus." General Hale's knees almost gave way. He reached for his chair and lowered himself slowly, staring in shock. "You're supposed to be dead," he said, voice trembling, "all of you. We were told the entire unit was lost." Ethan gave him a weary half-smile. Sometimes being dead is easier than being alive. The trainees behind Meyer exchanged confused glances. They'd never seen their general look shaken, let alone speechless. General Hale stood abruptly and walked around his desk with stiff movements, stopping just inches from Ethan. His eyes scanned him. His face, his scars, the tattooed arm he slowly revealed. There it was, the full sleeve, the unit marks, the codes, the falcon crest, the mission burns. The general's breath hitched. His voice broke. "My God, you're real." Ethan's expression softened. "We tried to come home. They shut the doors." For a moment the general didn't speak. Memories washed over him. Reports he'd read as a young officer, legends whispered by veterans, stories about a squad sent into the most dangerous corners of war. A squad that never returned. A squad that had saved hundreds without anyone knowing. He turned to the trainees. "Do you have any idea who stands before you?" he demanded, though his voice trembled. They all shook their heads, intimidated. "This man," the general said, pointing at Ethan, "led the most classified mission in our history. He saved an entire battalion in Black Ridge. He carried wounded soldiers for miles through fire and ambush while injured himself. He fought for a country that erased him." The room fell into stunned silence. Ethan looked down. He had never been comfortable hearing praise. He had been called a lot of things in his life, but hero always felt undeserved. No one was supposed to know. Ethan murmured, "We were told to disappear." General Hale's eyes grew wet, not with weakness, but with respect that bordered on heartbreak. "They lied," he said. "They lied to all of us." Maya felt a swell of emotion. She had followed her instincts, but she hadn't expected this. The general placed a firm hand on Ethan's shoulder. Gentle but filled with reverence. "You're home," he said, finally. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice almost breaking. "I don't know if I belong here anymore." "You always did," the general replied quietly. "It was us who failed you." The trainees lowered their eyes, ashamed of the way they had treated him. Their arrogance had shattered, but the moment wasn't finished. For as the room stood in silence, Ethan reached slowly into his old, frayed backpack, a bag that had survived more battles than most soldiers ever would. Inside was something that would change everything again, something the general never expected to see, and when Ethan pulled it out, the general's face went pale, because the past he thought was buried was about to rise in front of everyone. The news of Ethan Gray's presence at the base spread quickly, though quietly, among the ranks. Soldiers passed whispers from one to another, their voices low, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality before them. A man they had been told didn't exist was standing in their midst. A hero long forgotten had returned, and for some the return brought guilt, for others awe. Maya walked beside Ethan, careful to match his slow, deliberate pace. She could feel the tension emanating from him, the hesitancy born of years of being erased from the world. Yet there was a quiet strength too, something only those who had survived unimaginable trials could carry. She had spent the last few hours convincing him that this was not a trap, that the general truly wanted to acknowledge him, and that this base could be a safe place to begin again. As they moved through the hallways, soldiers who passed by instinctively saluted Ethan. Some froze in surprise when they realized whom they were saluting. Others whispered hurried apologies for the comments they had made earlier that had mocked him. The laughter, the arrogance, the ignorance, everything seemed small now, almost painfully insignificant in the shadow of what he had endured. When they reached the Veteran Rehabilitation Center inside the base, Maya gestured for Ethan to sit. She wanted to give him a moment of peace before the formal recognition began. He hesitated, then lowered himself into the chair with a weight that was both physical and emotional. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on photos of soldiers who had long since left or fallen, medals that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and plaques that commemorated deeds he himself had performed but had never been acknowledged. The general appeared again, walking with deliberate steps. This time there was no hesitation in his posture, but his eyes were moist, reflecting the weight of decades of history and unspoken regret. He approached Ethan slowly, his voice steady but filled with a rare emotion. "Ethan Gray," he said, standing before him, "the country owes you more than words can express. What you and your unit accomplished. It saved lives that can never be repaid, and for decades you were denied recognition. Today we begin to correct that." Ethan's voice caught in his throat. He had never sought medals or honors, never wanted parades or headlines. He had only wanted to serve, to protect, and to survive long enough to come home. But now, standing in this room, feeling the respect of a general who had once commanded him, he realized how profoundly he had been forgotten, and how profoundly he mattered. Maya stepped forward. "Sir," she said to the general, "I want Ethan included in our rehabilitation program. He deserves shelter, support, medical care, and respect. He deserves to be home." The general nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely," he said. "He will have everything he needs. Ethan Gray is one of us, and he always will be. This unit, this base, this country. We are your family now." Ethan's eyes flicked toward Maya, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief in his gaze. She smiled gently, her presence a steady reassurance that he was finally safe. The trainees who had once mocked him now looked on in shame, some with tears glistening at the edges of their eyes. The arrogance and ignorance that had filled the room mere hours ago were gone, replaced by reverence and quiet respect. Then came the final twist, one that would cement the story in a way no one could have predicted. Ethan reached into his frayed, worn backpack, slowly retrieving a notebook, its edges frayed and pages yellowed with age. He placed it carefully on the table in front of the general. "This," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "is the mission log of Ghost Division. Every detail, every code, every operation we carried out. And there's one thing you need to see. Proof that your father, General Hale, personally saved our unit during Black Ridge." The general's eyes widened. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the notebook, reverently opening the pages. His lips parted in disbelief. The revelation hit him like a physical force. He had always believed that the operation had ended in failure, that the cost had been absolute. But here, in the delicate handwriting, in the maps and coordinates, were the details of survival, proof of his father's courage, proof that lives had been saved by actions never recorded in history books. Tears filled the general's eyes, unspoken words trapped in his throat. He looked at Ethan, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and deep, personal reckoning in his gaze. For all these years, I thought he failed. I thought we lost you." Ethan nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "No, General, he saved us, and he saved me." Maya placed her hand gently on Ethan's shoulder, the warmth of her gesture a bridge between his past suffering and the new life awaiting him. The trainees looked on, humbled and changed. They had witnessed history firsthand, and it had altered them in ways they could not yet articulate. From that day forward, Ethan Gray was no longer a forgotten man. He received the care, respect, and home he had been denied for decades. Soldiers sought his advice, shared meals with him, and listened intently as he recounted lessons learned in the shadows of secret operations. The younger trainees who had mocked him became his apprentices, eager to absorb the wisdom and courage that only someone who had survived impossible odds could offer. And for Ethan, the transformation was profound. The street corners that had been his home, the cold nights, the loneliness, they became distant memories. What replaced them was a sense of belonging, the comfort of acknowledgement, and the simple dignity of being seen for who he truly was. In the end, it wasn't the tattoo that told the story. It wasn't the battles, the scars, or even the secret operations. The real story was the kindness that revealed the truth, the courage of one woman who refused to mock, who chose to see, who insisted on giving a man his rightful place in the world. Through that act of empathy, Ethan Gray went from being a forgotten ghost to a living legend. And in doing so, he reminded everyone around him that recognition, compassion, and respect can heal wounds that years of neglect could never erase. The past was finally acknowledged, the truth restored, and the world, a little colder for a while, was made warmer by the simple, transformative power of kindness.